Mayor, we've got other things to discuss.
I agree with you.
Including...
But I'm not going to be silent
to
allow them to speak.
Well, I appreciate that, too. The man in the red shirt, the second row from the back there.
President Bush has quite a cheek to go to the United Nations today and expect to get support from the world for his endeavor against Iraq when just a few weeks ago he dissed the UN conference in Johannesburg on sustainable development, where maybe some more concrete and viable ideas towards world peace were being put forward.
Jeff Hoon.
Britain, first of all, was a founder member of the United Nations. We're a permanent member of the Security Council.
You're talking about Bush,
I know,
not about Britain.
I'm getting there, don't worry.
It's a good resume, let him receive.
I believe that it's vitally important that we support international organisations and that we work together to try and resolve international issues, which is why the United Kingdom strongly supports the position that President Bush set out today at the United Nations. We want to see resolutions of the United Nations enforced. We want to see them enforced in New York as well as in Johannesburg and elsewhere. We've got to develop a system where international organisations do have the responsibility for tackling the kinds of problems that we face in the world. But equally, what he was saying absolutely clearly is that it is no good simply passing resolutions if those resolutions are not going to be enforced. Now, the United Kingdom strongly supports that position, and it's equally important that we give the United Nations the authority to take those decisions.
Is it your view, as the President put it today, that the UN will be irrelevant if it doesn't get its resolutions on it? Irrelevant?
I certainly believe that this is an important opportunity for the United Nations, in the light especially of September the 11th, because September the 11th brought us all up short. Let's be clear about it. We all thought on September the 10th that Afghanistan was a long way off. We knew that it had a pretty appalling government, but nobody seriously considered that that government could threaten the United States or threaten the United Kingdom or any other nation in the world. And we did not take action. What we have to do now is look carefully at the kinds of threats to our security posed by countries like Iraq as a result of the failure of the international community to take those threats seriously, which is why it is so important, as the President said today, that we work through the United Nations.
But sorry, he said that, but just to clarify the point, he said also that if the Security Council resolutions were not enforced, action will be unavoidable. In other words, I think it was generally interpreted as meaning that if the UN Security Council doesn't provide the wherewithal either to get its resolutions enforced or to take any action as a result, America will be entitled, justified to go it alone. I'm asking a question. Do you agree with that?
Well, the purpose of this is to make the world a safer place by removing the threat the weapons of mass destruction in the hands of Saddam Hussein pose. Now, what the President said today, what the Prime Minister has consistently said, is that if we go through the diplomatic route, that diplomatic route has to be effective. If it is not effective, clearly there are other routes that we might have to choose.
Michael Moore.
You know, the hypocrisy of this with the Bush administration. First of all, you've got Vice President Dick Cheney. Halliburton, when he was the CEO of Halliburton, two of his subsidiaries provided materials to Iraq, sold stuff to Iraq that could help them build their weapons, all right? This never gets discussed. These, I gotta say, I mean, I hate to put it this blunt, but, you know, Bush and Cheney, first of all, to me, they're an illegitimate government to begin with, because they're not there serving at the will of the American people. And these people will lie and lie and lie. They have lied for so long, and now they got caught in the big lie this year in the U.S. with Bush, with his insider trading when he was on the board of Harkin, and Halliburton with Cheney, and all their friends. This is where no, but this is the reason why we have to have a war to distract the people.
Your speech
to distract the people from the real issue.
Wait a minute.
No, hold on. Ed Koch. Ed Koch.
The first thing is I served with Dick Cheney and with Don Rumsfeld in the Congress. I was a member of Congress, and they are men of total integrity. And the terrible... Oh, listen, I don't know where they picked you off the street, but nevertheless, I want to say this to Michael.
They were out there with me.
When you just throw charges around that can't be answered, the fact is that this country has never had better leadership. When this crowd She is an illegitimate government. The government of the United States is illegitimate.
No. Bush and Cheney are illegitimate.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to go down. We
We
know.
won't debate Florida 2000.
Michael Moore, we know.
It's too bad that Michael doesn't understand our electoral process and how the law works.
One person,
But if
one
I can-
vote.
Well, let me point He doesn't.
All right.
You know?
Can we get away from the specific charges that you make against President, Vice President, and deal with the issues that this country is facing and what was said at the UN? And I put to you, can the UN, the question that was asked, can the UN have any credibility if for almost 10 years Iraq has ignored its resolutions?
I think that Bush today declared the United Nations irrelevant by essentially the threat that he issued, saying that we're going to go ahead and do it anyways, whether you do it or not. So he's essentially saying, this is just kind of a waste of my time. I'm here, you're here, we're all in New York, but we're going to go do what we want to do, even if it is against the will of the American people or the British people. And the arrogance of that and how that's viewed around the world is appalling. And I want to just say to people who are watching this around the world that that is not representative of the majority of Americans.
Okay, hold on, Victoria. Sheik Hamza, we've heard from you on this point. Thank you.
Well, I've spent probably half my adult life outside of this country, and I would have to agree, I don't feel that the American people and the essential goodness of this people is being well represented outside of America by certain flawed foreign policies that this country has and continues to have. And what I really fear, if we're talking about security and the future, I very seriously fear a world in which over 70% of the people do not have potable drinking water, that we're dealing with massive poverty. We're looking, if you look just at the Arab world alone, you're dealing with extraordinarily high birth rates and populations that have unemployment of sometimes 25%. Now, we can't, obviously, this country cannot solve all the problems of the world, and I don't think America should do that. But I don't think America should be part of the problems that are existing in the world because of very serious, flawed foreign policy.
Wait a minute. I'm trying to get the logic here. Let me see if I can figure this out. Because there are some people starving in this world, we should not defend our nation? That is what I'm hearing you say.
No, I'm not talking about defending the nation. If every nation has a right to defend itself, and
that is what we are doing.
This is exactly what Mr. Cohen said today in the United Nations by resolution, by Mandate 51. But if you look at how we are defending ourselves, in other words, is going and bombing people, continuing to support tyrants around the world. I mean, we forget, like Michael pointed out, that Saddam Hussein was largely created by the West, and we have to deal with this fact. Now, hold on. If you look at,
I could just talk for a minute
I know.
here.
Just let me finish my point here. If you look at the arms around the world, where are they produced, and why aren't the producers taken into account? If France, Britain, the United States, I mean, we're supplying the world with weapons, and then when these weapons get out of control, we come in as the bully man and say, we're going to take these weapons out of your hands.
It's not those weapons that the President was talking about. It's anthrax he was talking about. It's nuclear weapons. It's also things that haven't been.
These chemicals were sent over by the United States between 1985 and 1989.
You're saying the United States gave them
No, I'm not
poison
saying it. A
gas?
1994 U.S. Senate report said that we allowed these shipments to be made by American corporations to Iraq, and they have been able to use the elements of those to create their weapons. It starts right here.
It's an old
Victoria
debating
Tonsig.
tactic. It's called straw man. It's an old debating tactic. All of us lawyers knew it. You just make up something, and then you try to strike it down. Listen to the words of Michael Moore. I finished. You said Halliburton
Barely
gave.
made it through high school.
Now let Victoria Tonsig have her say, please.
Thank you. Halliburton sold things to Iraq that could have been used in a war, or sold things to Afghanistan that could have been used in a war. You can give food to a country, and then that can feed the army. This is ridiculous that you're just making up these things about what our country has done and associating them with evil deeds when you know that for 10 years we have been absolutely adamant about taking away these weapons of mass destruction from Iraq.
So, Michael, will you agree that Iraq used poison gas and killed 5,000 Iraqi Kurds and thousands of Iranian soldiers. Would you agree?
That is correct.
Okay.
And one year after they did that, in 1984, on November 26, 1985, the United States returned full diplomatic recognition to Iraq.
Listen, I will tell you, I'm going to explain. Look, I want to explain to you.
And so
you know, it's
funded
not
them.
like cutting the
We
cloth.
gave Saddam $3 billion in aid, which helped them to buy these weapons.
Yes,
that's the ugly past of this.
Okay. You don't listen. If the United States believes that at the time Iran is a greater threat and that Iran and Iraq are engaged in a battle, they're going to help the lesser threat. And there's nothing wrong with that. Well, I don't think there is.
All right. Sheik Hamza, I want you to clarify one thing. What is your position on what happened at the UN today and what Bush said?
Well,
are you against the resolutions being having force attached to them to impose them on Iraq?
I think it's absolutely necessary for the United States, in order to reestablish some moral credibility in the world, that it needs to work within the constraints of international law. And I think that, unfortunately, what I read today was, in a sense, you need to agree with us or you're irrelevant. In other words, you need to be on board, make this a multilateral war against Iraq, or you're irrelevant. And I think the point made, India has not abided by resolutions about Kashmir, for instance. And so for one state it applies, but for other states it doesn't apply. And I think that's where people around the world feel that there is hypocrisy. And I think if it's established across the board, I think that everybody will breathe a sigh of relief. But when the United Nations is used as a rubber stamp, and the other resolutions that are being ignored by other states are not applied, then this is where...
You can't
Hold on a second. I want to ask what the British position is on this, because Jeff Hoon, you said it's perfectly possible to take action under international law without a specific UN resolution. Is that still your position? Is your position that while it might be nice to have UN resolutions, it doesn't matter if you don't get them?
Well, the law says that if you are attacked, you can respond, and that doesn't require a Security Council resolution. But clearly it is preferable to have a Security Council resolution. And I think it's important to note what President Bush actually said at the United Nations this afternoon. He said that the United States would work with the United Nations Security Council to meet the common challenge of Iraq. He said that the world must move deliberately, decisively to hold Iraq to account. And he said that the United States would work with the United Nations Security Council for the necessary resolutions. Now, that's not a unilateralist position. That is committing the United States to work with other countries in the United Nations.
You said if we're not careful, another resolution will just add to the pile of paperwork in New York.
Well, that is why it's vitally important. In the next paragraph, he went on to say that those resolutions must then be enforced. There is no point in passing resolutions if that is simply an obstruction to taking action. But the action that we're talking about is to remove a threat to our safety and security. If that can be achieved by diplomatic means, that's what we ideally want. If it cannot be, then we must recognize that we have to back up those resolutions by the threat of force.
Herman Waltz, who asked the question, what do you think of what you've heard?
Well, I think that it's easy to say we should rely on resolutions, but I think you're all bypassing the question. They've been ignored. What are we to do? We can go back for another resolution and another resolution, but in times like this, when we're being attacked, we can differ over the things that have happened in the past or other differences between other nations. If some other nation has an issue they want to take to the United Nations, let them do it. But we have an issue that's paramount to us, that threatens us, that people have died from. We must respond. So either the United Nations stands with us, or they're not part of us, and then they are irrelevant.
Okay.
Except it wasn't Iraq that attacked us.
Oh, yes.
And even George W. Bush and his people have admitted this week that there is no connection between Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
But that is not why the United States is taking on...
So once they ran out of that excuse, now they've come up with a new one, that there's weapons of mass destruction.
Do you doubt it?
We've heard this for 12 years.
Then you doubt it.
All right.
12 years.
The fact is...
Mr. Blix...
How can you let him...
Mr.
He's here on the panel. He can say, and you can say, but I wanted a little bit of democracy. I wanted one voter at the back to speak again, because he was the person who challenged him. Yes.